Discuss the pattern matching and regular expressions in more details, and if you are wondering, this will be part of the lab test 3, will be at the end of November. And we will discuss the Junit test, and at that time I will try to connect my laptop and do some work in front of you, how we can create the Junit test. And actually I use the Junit test to test and to evaluate your answers for the lab test too. It's very efficient methodology to test the code and make sure the model that we create, the classes, the method are completely and accurately implemented. And also we will discuss the collections. We'll hope we touch the topic collections in more details next week, but we will introduce the collections this week and the way of thinking of the collections. Before I jump too deep, I will just mention something about that surprised me during the lab test, and also when I look at the sum of program implementation for the programming part. I saw that some of the students, for example, they use a regular expression to answer the questions. Some of them, they use collection, even array list, and we didn't cover that yet. And I asked you, give me whatever you think about these regular expressions.
So the word
start with. That's right. You look at this part. There is a kill braces here. You 4 and 15. You start reading from that part. You're saying that anything, at least I need 4 from it, or 15. What does this mean? End of the line. Okay, you start from the end. What about you start from this one? What does this mean? Beginning of the line. It's not inside the square bracket. If it's inside the square bracket, it means exclude things. But it's in the beginning. So we have the beginning of the line, end of the line. So we are looking for something written at the beginning and end. And this something should start with the letters, either small or capitals, from A small up to Z small, or A capital to Z small. So this start point. Then we have /W. What's the /W shortcut for what? Word characters. Can include underscore too. Yes? Good. And you need this 4 times at least, and maximum 15 times. So if someone writes something 16, you exclude it. Yes? Immediately. So this represents, let's say, a word or a password that must start with the characters, not underscore or integers, okay? Contains only letters, numbers, and underscore, that is W, the objective of using W, at least 5, or at least 4 or 5. Why 5? Why is not 4?
Because the first letter is 1 and
Exactly. So this is not for whole things. This only for this expression, which is /W. You see, this 4 and 15 for this W, but this is a single digit. So 4 plus 1 is 5, so at least 5 characters. And maximum is 16. Any question? So being able to have the expression and annotate it and understand what this expression, that is the good sign. Okay? So we have the expression, being able to understand it, annotate this expression, and understand what this expression is looking for. Okay, by having that expression, and I give you these, as you can see here, we have the string of candidate, and then we ask another method, which is we ask the class name, and then we ask test run, and we give the pattern, a candidate, and show the groups. and this is the test 1. It's receive the array of a string, as you mentioned, array of a string. We take the pattern, we compile the pattern, and we run through the array of a string, and then if it's the match, we say yes, no, and then we print the match, and then we iterate through the group of the match. So all this code is on the slides. I encourage all of you to go over these slides, try to have Android Studio next to you, and try to copy paste this code to the Android Studio and run it and see what's the output. So by going back here, by just you as a human understand what's the pattern is meaning, what of these match the pattern and what of these not matching the pattern. Of course, because it starts with the letter, you exclude it at all. Third one is not matching. Why? Is not long enough. And anything else? So both we agree about the first, second one, and the third one. Let us see. So this is. So the first one is match, the second one no, the third one no, and the rest is matching. Okay? Which one? This? Oh, show group, you have to go to this method, and then you see this is a Boolean show groups, and this it's grouping. Okay, if you have matches group number is greater than 0, okay, and show group is true, that means you print this one. You have more than one, okay, you find inside this matches. It's I leave it for you. I put it in the slide, but I leave it for you to discover it. Okay, it's whenever you search for the groups of the pattern. In this case, we're going to have a group only one because we are matching only one group. Okay, this is a case study. If you have, suppose all the students are assigned a 3-digit code, and the first digit represents the majors of the students, 5 indicate computer science students. Then we have a second digit that represent either in-state, out-state, or foreign students. And then the third digit indicate the campus housing. So in campus, we will have 1 to 7, and the students live off the campus represented by 8 digits. Okay, so you can here, this is a valid expressions. You can search for computer science students, and they must be 1, 2, or 3, and then they live on campus. That's why you put 1 to 7. Okay, they search for computer science students, either on-state, out-state, or foreign students, and as long as it's live on the campus. Okay, now is the JUnit. Let me just try to set up the machine. Hopefully we can have some presentation about the JUnit, because it's good to learn by example. Good. Okay. So I hope again we can do some recording. Okay, so now everybody, you create some models in your apps. For example, you create this model for the Bmi model here. This is okay? Text? So this is a Bmi model you created for app 1. You say I have a class called Bmi model. You define two attributes, as you can see here. We have a private double weight and private double height. And then you create a constructors. And that's where I find most of the students struggles. What the meaning of constructor? We discussed on the class that the constructor is responsible of taking arguments and create an object for us, and is the entry point to interact with the class. You create a class. If you do want anyone to create any object from this class, you create a private constructor, an empty private constructor, so no one can create an object from this class. But if you decide that I want a class where the user can create object from this class, you provide a public constructors. And now there is a lot of variations. You can have a public constructors, for examples, that can take two strings, as you can see here, and whenever I receive string W and H at two strings, I will create an object and I will initialize the weight and the height. I can have an empty constructor. For example, I can create public. Now the constructor, there is no retain type. I don't need a retain type for the constructors. I can create a constructor. Or there's some another methods. You can right click here and go to generate, and then we'll give you the options. I need a constructors. So you can create a constructor. I need a constructor with only doubles, I mean the weight or the height. So I need the constructors for both. Good, I can select them and create a constructor. See, very simple things. You can create a constructor using Android Studio. Oh, now you see this. This is another version of constructor. These two constructors, the first constructors, the signature of the first constructor is the name is exactly match with the name of the class, Bmi model. Here, two argument, string W and string H. Here we have another constructor with the same name, but the signature is different. Here we receive two parameters. One is W and the other one is height. Not only the name of them is different. I can make this weight and height the same name, but still there is no problem here. I can, here is height, and this I will need to adjust it to weight and adjust this to height. There is no problem. These two constructors, they have different signature. Why? Because the one in the top here receiving two inputs of type strings. This is receiving two input of type doubles. So these two constructors are the same. I can create a copy constructors. A copy constructors for this method is take already made objects, a Bmi model objects, and create a new object with the same weight and the same height. So I can create a copy constructor here saying public, the same thing, Bmi model, and then I say I need a Bmi model, that is other object. So I take a Bmi model that is already created and initialize. This is a copy constructor. The thing about copy constructor is taking existing objects of type Bmi model and create a new objects of type Bmi with the same state. What is the state of Bmi model? Any object of Bmi model has weight and a height. These weight and height, the value for the weight, the value for the height represent the state of the model or the state of the objects. So I say, okay, this dot weight equal other dot weight. And then I say this dot height equal other dot height. So this is a copy constructors. You take the existing object of type Bmi and then you create a new object with this. How I can use this method, how I can test it, and you can see here we have a get Bmi method that will take the weight and divide it by the weight times the height and then create a string and then return a string to the user. This is 2 bound, that's take the weight and convert it to the bound. This is 2 feet, that take nothing and work with the existing height that represent the state of the model and use utility dot meter to feet inch will retain. To test this class, what we can do, we can use the main method. The main method here can use it to test our model, if our model is correct or not. I know if I give the weight is 100 and the height is 1.8 meters, I know what is the Bmi. I can run this one, and then once I have the result, I can compare the result with the manual calculation that I have. Then I say, oh, my model is correct. My model is correct. Now, as you can see here, these 2 attributes or these 2 features or fields inside, you can see here, this is the result. Whenever we have the weight we have the weight on bound, we have the height on this, and then we have the Bmi. And also this is the output of 2 bounds and 2 feet and inch. Then I evaluate the output by looking as a developers to the output and do the manual calculation on pencil and papers and evaluate my methods. Also, one thing I would like to add to this class, you see here these are private. So I would like to get the weight and the height method. So I can ask to generate, here I can ask right click, generate, and I need getter method. So I can generate a get method for both of them. Then I have 2 methods here, get weight and get height, and then I can interact with the object by get. I cannot use set method. I can use set method because these are private. Can I use set method? I create the object, and after I create the object, I decide to change the height. If this is part of, remember the string? The string is immutable object. So once you create the string, you cannot change the state of the string. You can change the state of the string by destroying the existing one and create a new one with a new value for the string. Is that right? The same thing. Is Bmi model is immutable object? Once I create the Bmi, I cannot change it? No, I create a Bmi for some students, and then after 3 months, he gain a new weight. So I can change the weight. I can set the weight. So the weight is a private, so I cannot set it directly by saying Bmi here in the method. I go here, for example, I say my model dot, I cannot see here the weight and height. Even if I put a weight equal, let's say 20, it will not run. Why this weight is private? Let's try. Maybe I'm wrong. It's running. So what's wrong? Why I can't change the weight directly? is in the same class. Did you see that? We can change the weight. How I cannot change the weight? The main method inside the same class. Okay. Let us here create a new class. And then create main method and define my model. Sorry, it's called Bmi Model. My model equal new Bmi Model. I call the constructors. Now I have two versions of the constructor, the one that receives strings and the one that receives doubles. So I can say I need a constructor with and then I have the height 1.5. Then I can ask, I print the model. What do you think the output of this class, if I run it? You see the output here? Why do you think that the output is? Why do you think the output is looking like this? Yes? Yes. Yes, we need two string methods. So we can go back here to this one and we can ask generate. I don't know how to write two strings. I can ask two strings. I need two strings. Yes, I need both of them. Then this is the default one. So this is will generate two strings for me. And as you can see, this is override. Okay, override. So now if I run this one, what do you think the output will be? Bmi model, then you have the braces, you have the weight is equal, and the height is equal. If I want to print Bmi model in different way, you can say, I want to say this is EECS1022 Bmi model, for example. I save this one, I go back here and run it again. This will be printing now the Bmi model, as you can see. Now, that's back to our questions. I cannot change. I say my model dot weight. I don't see the weight even. Okay, weight is equal to, let's say, 1.6, whatever is the value. I cannot even, the compiler is saying you cannot access the weight because the weight is a private, and this is method main outside the class. Then again back to the questions. Why I was able to do this? Because the main method inside the same class, and the private you can access it from within the class, but you cannot access the private outside the class. Okay, so to be able to access the weight from outside, if it's private, you need to, this is a get method, you need to add what we call set method, the setter method. You can generate them also directly. Do you know in 2030 that we asked the students to create a set method, get method, and they were not able to do that? Even it's just a few click, right click, and then select on the clips. In the 2 and 3 we use the clips, not in our studio. But even this, generate a set method and get method, they don't know how to do generate because they're not familiar with the environment. So you can see here I didn't a few types. Normally I rely on the Android Studio to create a constructors for me, to create a get method, set method. I just focus on the real implementation, for example, for calculating the BMI. So now I have the set method. To be able to set the height, what should I do? Or the weight? I call dot set height, for example. I change the height to 1.9. And then I can print the model again and see if this is effect. By doing this, I test the model. Is that right? I'm doing the test now to see if this really going to change the status. This consider an efficient way for a small model. But if you have a big model that you need to test, this will not be an efficient way. You need to rely on some testing mechanisms to test your functionality or your model efficiently. So we go to you can see here, there is two types of tests on the Android Studio. There is Android Studio test here. This is the instrumented test, which is really focus on the test of the app and simulate the existence of end user who interact with your app. Then you test that. And the other test is a traditional Java test, which is the test that we're going to cover today. And this is not part of the course. We're not going to generate the test that simulate the interaction between end user and the app and simulate what is the input of the user and then see the interaction. This is not part of our. We're going to create here the traditional Java test, which is use the JUnit test. So whenever you need to create the class on the test, you go to the test package. This is a package. Right click and then you add a new class. You call the class whatever you like. Let's say a Bmi test 2. And this class, it's an empty class for testing your Bmi models. So you can test individual methods, you can test the constructors, you can test the get method, set method, all of this you can create individual test units and then you run all these individual test units either alone or all together to generate. So I have created here in this two JUnit tests to test only 2 pounds. This is how you create. Let me just go back here. If you would like to add any JUnit test here or any unit test, you just right click and say generate. I need a test method. It's give you a empty test method. You name it whatever. Let's say I need to test. You start test. I need to test what? Get height. And then you start writing your code to test the JUnit test. Let us see some example that I create. For example, here we need public void test 2 pounds. I create the model with some height and weight, and then I know based on my calculations that if I call 2 pound method, I should retain a string as 220. So then I ask assert equals. There is a message that I'm going to print it to the user if there is any errors, and if I expected is equal my model.2 pounds. This part, my model.2 pound, represent your implementation. You are testing your models before you put it inside the app. I'm testing the model that I can transfer any kilograms to pound correctly. So I created one JUnit test with some examples that this model with weight 100 and if I use 2 pounds should transfer this 200 to 220. Then I can run this test individually or I can run all the tests together. Okay? So another test, I change the Bmi model, I expect 99. This is what happened. In the exam, lab test 2, I give you some examples. And I ask you to create a method. For example, if I give you this input array, the average of even numbers will be like this. So these examples, when I evaluate your program, I translate these examples to JUnit test. And also, I add another examples that is not seen by you. I did it. So what happened that I found some students, they create a method which is that if this input, retain this one. If this input, retain this one, like the string number of white spaces inside the string. If this is a string equal to this, retain 4. If this is string, retain 11. But what about other JUnit test cases that I hide it from you and we need to evaluate? I create another one. Like find the mean and median. I give you examples. Some students, if this is the array, give me this median. They didn't do implementation yet, actually. They try to make the implementations as the examples, which is not fair. So that's why we have the JUnit as a powerful method to evaluate. So I can go here and run all the JUnit test, and it's give me the output. If this is JUnit is running or not, you can see here, it's passing. That's meaning green, it's passed. 2 test is passing here on this one. Now let's assume that a student who have a wrong implementation for 2 pounds, okay? So let's say here, the students is supposed to divide by this number, and student decide to divide by 0.45. So this implementation should be wrong. So if I run the JUnit test again, you can see that these 2 tests are failed. So this is about evaluating, and you can see here we have expected is 220 and the result is 222. So there is a deviation from what is expected and what is correct. Okay? Let us back to the original implementations and discuss another example. Now, sometimes I have another JUnit test, okay, on the examples here, on the projects. For example, this is the mortgage model that you create. All of you create this mortgage model. And to be able to test this mortgage model, you can create the main method, as you can see, create the mortgage models and evaluate this one and run the main methods and then see if the things be compatible with the pencil and papers that you did. Or you can create a JUnit test here inside the test for the mortgage, and you can run this. This is a JUnit test, and you can see here is assert equal, assert true, assert false. There's a lot of assertions on the you can use inside your JUnits, and I can run all of them here. Now, as you can see, I have to go to each one of these JUnit and run it independently. But again, you can have things here built on edit configurations. I need to create a test environment, Android JUnit test. I can name it my test, okay? And then I need to be all packages in the whole projects, okay? And say apply, okay. Then if I run this environment, it will run all the JUnit tests inside my projects. As you can see, all the JUnits here on this side, I run all the JUnits. So assume that you have an app that contains many classes, and for each class you create the JUnit test for it. And in this time, you need to run all the JUnit for your app to make sure you can create an environment where you can run all the JUnits. Any question? So this is all about the JUnit. It's good to learn it by examples, okay? I can talk the lectures hours and hours about the component of JUnits and how to efficiently implement the JUnit, but these examples highlight the actual process that you need to do to test your models. So I create the class for my app. Then I would like to evaluate this class. I create many methods, as you can see, either to use the main method approach, where you can write some examples and evaluate, or you can use the JUnit approach by using the traditional way of JUnit by creating the class and test. Any question? Did any one of you use the JUnit before? One? Okay, two? Use it? Okay. Okay, so let us stop the demo and stop the recording here. Try to submit this one back. Okay. So here we have some slide. In some terms about the testings, we have the unit testing that testing the model by itself. So you can see here we have a system. System is many components inside the system. Component A, P, and C, and D, and E. All these components are interacting with each other. The input of one component is the output of other components. So we can use the unit testings by taking each component and test it by itself. And that's testing A alone, testing E alone. We can use integrated testing by testing a group of models, like I need to see the interaction between A and P. I know there is no interaction between C and P, so I don't need to test interaction or integration between B and C, but I need to have the integration between A and P, and then A and C, and so on. System testing, a fully integrated testing that tests complete system. And acceptance testings, which is a process of a real demo, a real data, real users who are going to use your apps and test the apps. In this class, we're going to use the unit testings as you saw. We have some methods individually we tested, some classes individually we test this class. Then after we make sure that a class is working correctly, we run the apps. Now 90% of the testings normally developer do is unit testings, is taking the units per unit and test it. As you saw, we have two bounds methods, we test it individually. We can have get method test, set method test. We can have a method constructor method test. So we can have a test for each individual components. This is an example that we discussed in case of the demo was not working, but actually it's worked. So everybody build the BMI models, and you create the test using a main method approach, or then you print the output, you check the output, or you can have the JUnit test by going to testing and then create a new class. You will have one example unit test. This is the examples. You can use it. You can change the name of it and use it. Or you can create your own class, new BMI test method. Then inside it, you can generate, as you can see, test. Then it will be empty JUnit test. And inside it, you can set the value for the test. Any question? Okay. Then we have two tests, and we can run these two tests. And in case of we have failure, you will see this screen that there is a failure. Two tests are failing. Okay, and all of this can be captured on the log file. I can search inside the search. That's what happened. I use the regular expression. I use the JUnit to evaluate your test. Okay, any question? Good. So within a few minutes, we're going to discuss the collections. But before we go inside, dig deep on the collections, we need to highlight, not on details, but on the top level, what is interface. In Java, you can create a class. and then you can say, this class, I need an object from this class. So you provide a public constructors, and then you tell the user how they can create an object from this class. Or you say, I need a class, but I don't need anyone to create an object from it. So you create a private empty constructors. So no one can create like the math, like the characters, like this big arrays, dot. So these methods are created by Java expert, and they don't need anyone to create an object from the math class. So that's why you cannot create an object. They they create a private constructor, an empty one. No one can create an object from the math. And there is another type inside Java. It's called interfaces. You say, I would like to create a class, but I'm not going to write the definition of each method. But I need this class to contain a specific method. When we say a method, that means we say a behavior. We say that a class contains data and behaviors. Behavior responsible for the method. When you implement a specific method, you implement a behavior, like Bmi Model. You say, I need a behavior for this model to transfer any kilogram to pound. So the methods are called behavior. So I need a class that contains some constant and also contains some behaviors. But again, the definition of the behavior is not completely defined. I need someone to implement this interface if you decide to implement this interface, you decide to write the definition in your way. But I guarantee that you have this method inside your class. So the interface is a reference type. It's not an object type. So you use it always on the left side. So it's a reference type. It's not an object type. It contains some nested types, method signatures, and some constant. A method body is not defined inside the interface. There's no definition. No, like to bound, I just give you the header. I didn't define the body of it. Now, you cannot institute from the interface. You cannot create an object. That's why I told you it's a reference type. You can use it on the reference side. You cannot use it on the object side, on the right side. In you cannot use it with the new. You cannot create a new object from an interface. Can be implemented by other classes, and that is the beauty of it. You have the interfaces defined. You can ask other people to implement your interface. Can be extended by another interface, which is not actually part of this course. You cannot, inheritance is about inheritance. You can create an interface and you extend it from parent to child interface and all so on. All the methods in the interface, by default, public abstract methods. Again, it's another, I know it's not part of your class. What is abstract? It's another class, another type of class. You can create a class, you can create an abstract class, and you can create an interface. But to be able to understand the collections, we need to understand what is the interface. So we know that the interface, there is only the definition, the signature of the method, some constant. We cannot create object from the interface. If you take this only, that's good for me. This is an example. You say, I need a public interface, drivables. Any things can drive should have a method start, forward, 10 with some angles, and stop. This is an interface. It's just a method. As you can see, there is no implementation for these methods, and it's called public interface drivables. So this is exactly the interface. Is a signature of the methods. There is no definitions, no bodies for the methods, and we say anything can move, drivables, should has a start method. I know that driving the bicycle is different from driving the car, so the start method implemented on the bicycles is different from the motorcycles, is different from the car, but I know that bicycles, motorcycles, and car are all drivable objects. Is that right? To be able to drive the car, implement the drivable interface. So you need to give me a method to start the bicycles, how to start the bicycles, how to start the car, how to start the motorcycles. All these are different implementations, but all of them agree to implement the interface. So there is a forward, moving forward, or there is a turning to angle. I know turning an angle on the motorcycle is maybe similar to bicycles, but it's different in the car. Okay? And also stop. Stopping the bicycle is different from stopping the motorcycles or the car. So the implementation is different, but all of these objects are drivables and should contain these 4 methods. So in this case, we have the bicycles like this: public, class, bicycle, implement drivables. So a drivable is the interface. When I say that I'm going to create a class called bicycles that's implemented drivable, the compiler will not allow me to compile. I should provide the implementation for all these 4 methods. I should give the implementation for the start, for turning, for forwarding, and for stop. So if I'm going to start the bicycles, I should did some step. In this case, I just print a string. Forward, should I give some instructions to the user how to go forward on the bicycles. And this is just an example to demonstrate what is the interface is. Now, if I have a car, absolutely the car is a drivable. In this case, we have name for the car, and we provide a method. We have the constructors, and also in addition to that, this car implement the drivable interface. Once I say that my object implement a specific interface, that means this object should provide implementations and definitions for all the method inside the interface. So in this case, our interface is drivables, contains start, stop, forward, and turn. So this method, this class car, should give me the implementation for all of them. So in this case, I should see start, forward, and turn, and stop. Any question? Yes? Yes. This is more like an at override. This is not necessary. This is annotations is generated by the Java automatically. If you want Java to, I can delete them and still compile the code, but it's more for the reader to know that this method is actually overriding from the interface. So this is annotations, and when we teach the students on 2030, we teach the Java documentations. Java documentations is generate the documentation that you write it inside the body of the code as an HTML page. So this annotation will help on the Java documentation. When I run the Java documentation for my code to generate the HTML page that I can share with the users, this annotation is very important. Okay? But for the sake of compiling the code and running the code, this annotation has no weight there, but has a lot of meaning weight on the documentations. If I am going to go to document my code to know that this method is actually originally is defined on the interface, is not originally defined here, like toString. toString is from the object class. Object class is the father for all the classes that we created. Even if we didn't explicitly extend the object, Java will extend the object class, where toString is written there. And you override it, as you saw here on this demo, we override it for a BMI. We say whenever we ask BMI print, we need to print the BMI differently. Okay? Any other questions? Oh, nested type means you have an object of bicycle here inside the class. So another object inside it, okay? So I can have inside the interface is another constant of different types, okay? So like you have a car class, inside it there is a wheel as an object, the engines as an object, okay? It's a compound, and there is a compositions, and these will be another topics for 2030. Okay? Any other questions? Yes?
You
Yes, I can still add a new methods to the car, but the compiler will not allow me to go forward without implementing start, forward, chain, and stop. Because I declare on the header, I'm going to implement a drivable interface. Okay? Yes, of course, I can add any other methods that related to a car. As you can see here, I have attribute and the constructor. Yes? In the Java, you cannot leave the method without the definition, only in the abstract levels, or if you declare this is an abstract method, which is out of scope of this course. So if you want to declare that some method inside this is not implemented, and if you gonna implement it later on for any object, that should be abstract class. So abstract class is different from interface by it contains some implementations, but there's some method is not implemented, okay? In the interface, nothing is implemented. Any other question? Okay. So this is the way of showing the relation between the car and bicycles to the interface. And here is very important. So we can use the drivable as a reference. We cannot use it as to create an object. You can see here, I can create a car object, a new car. I give the name for the car. Then I can ask the car A to start, car A to go forward. And you can see here the reference type or the declaration type is what? Car. Look here, a drivable car P. This is a valid. There's no problem. I can use a drivable as a reference type. This is why I told you on the left side, you can use the reference, but I cannot use it here in the new. So I can have this new car P, and I can ask the car P to go forward, to go 10 left or right. I can use a drivable as a reference. I cannot use it inside the new. So this is okay. No, you cannot use new with the interface. This I cannot use new with the interface. This is wrong. Keep it in your mind. You cannot create object from the interface. You can use the interface, as you can see in the previous slide, in the reference type. Here in the reference type, I can use drivables. But I cannot use new drivables. Okay? Yes? Oh, the difference will be clear when we go to the collections. All these discussions to build the ground that we can start on discussing the collections. Because collections is built on this kind of relation between interface and the collections. So if I create, you can see here, I can use a drivable car with this simple example. You have bicycles and the car, both implemented drivable, yes? So imagine I have a bicycle object. I can assign the bicycle object to the car P. So because car P is reference type is a drivable. So drivable can accept any drivable objects. Bicycle is a drivable object, car is a drivable object. But in the case of I define car A, if I use car A equal, or I use car A to reference a bicycle, compiler will say, that's wrong. What you're doing? You create a car, the only car reference a car. But you create a car P with the reference type is a drivable. So you can use a car P to reference to bicycles, to motorcycles, to car in your program, which is give you more flexibility on the programming. Okay? And that is just for this simple examples. The same thing for the collections. You create an array list, hash map list, you create an array list, linked list, both of implement a list interface. So inside your programming, you can assign the object to the list. It gives you more flexibility, and you don't need to replicate your code whenever you are using a array list or linked list. So you can use only one reference as a list. So with this simple example, you can see I can create a drivable object and then create a new car, assign it to it, and I don't need to create a new object. I'm using the same object to create a new bicycles. So that's why the interface is very powerful methods, and we only use them on the reference type. We cannot create object from the new drivable. So keep this in your mind. If you see this in the test, we cannot create object from interface. This is wrong. Okay? Just to summarize, interface contains method declarations and any constants you may have. All the methods inside the interface, you cannot have a private method. Keep that in your mind too. All the methods by definitions, even if I didn't put public in the front of them, they are public. Java expert, they will take it and make it public methods, even if you miss that. If you don't write it, it's a public. Doesn't mean it's a... They are all, interface are purely abstract classes, and that's what we discuss, but is not your topic to understand what is abstract class is. Your topic is to understand what is interface is, and you cannot create object from the interface. And interface are meant to be implemented, and once you decide to implement the interface, you have to implement all of them. If you miss one of them, the compiler will stop you. And the class can extend a single class, but it can implement many interfaces. This, you will see the beauty of it in 2030, but just keep it in your mind for informations. Okay, just to summarize, interface and the classes are user-defined type. You can define whatever you like as an interfaces. You can set a method inside the interface, but you cannot have the data, only constant. Inside the class, you can have data and constant. As you see in the Bmi model, we have the height and the weight and some methods. The methods are implemented inside the class, but inside the interface, it is not implemented. And you cannot create object from interface. You can create object from the class. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to start a new discussing the collection next time.